just because you're thinking, oh, this is a volitional action, putting food into my mouth. No, it's not under your volitional control. Eventually, you will fail. And if then the food that we choose to eat to break that is releasing huge amounts of insulin into our bloodstream, and that's what people don't realize, that as soon as you put carbohydrates and highly processed foods into the equation, you're releasing massive amounts of insulin that just puts our body into fat storage form. And here's another thing. You think with all that energy coming in that you'll have energy to burn, that your body will say, hey, I've got heaps of energy here, I'm going to be very active. No. In actual fact, what the insulin does is you've got a choice. That energy that comes in, your body can stuff it straight into the fat stores, or it can direct it to be burnt for energy. And insulin takes it away from that available energy and stuffs it into fat stores. So even though you've got all of this energy coming in, your body doesn't perceive that it's available. And this is why you might feel lethargic at the same time. So we've actually done research where we've put people on diets that will lead to lower insulin levels. And we've found that even for consuming the exact same amount of calories, so calorie-controlled diets, that people on the lower carbohydrate diets will burn at rest, just sitting down, 300 kilocalories more per day. Now, for reference, that's the same as if you were going for a bike ride for an hour. So when it comes to weight loss, it's not just eat less and exercise more. Now, if you could eat less and exercise more, that could lead to weight loss, but that doesn't tell you how to do it. The fact is these things are under the drive, the chemical drive of dopamine and serotonin in the brain. And then what you do with those chemicals is under the hormonal influence of insulin. And if you're having a diet that is excessively addictive, you're just going to want to eat that, and then leading to all of these chronic inflammations, nutrient deficiencies, and high levels of insulin, your body's just going to store it as fat. So are you familiar with what we call total parenteral feeding?
No, what is that?
So it's what happens, let's say if you had a problem with your throat or your stomach and for some reason you couldn't eat, but we'd still need to give you nutrition. So we would just take one of your veins and would put in a large cannula, and we could feed you all the nutrition that you needed through a vein. So, and presumably, if we provided you with every nutrient, micronutrient, macronutrient that you needed, then you could stay healthy. Makes sense. So in the 1970s, they did a fabulous study where they experimented with what would happen when they manipulated the micronutrient composition of what was coming in. Now, the thing to understand is that through urine tests and blood tests, we have markers that tell us how much fat you're forming, how much bone and muscle you're forming, or whether indeed you're breaking things down. And we found that if we, say, took away sodium, which is salt that's found in sodium chloride, which is table salt, if we took away the sodium, then we could reduce your ability to form muscle and bone by about 2/3. If we eliminated potassium completely, we could basically completely stop all bone and muscle formation. So these little things are actually very necessary for our body to build lean tissues. Now, and it's pretty obvious. If you imagine that muscle contains potassium and you completely eliminate all potassium from your diet, then how is your body going to make muscle when you take it in? It's like if you're trying to build a complex recipe and you take 3 key ingredients out. You can't just add more of the other ingredients and make that recipe. It's if you're missing something substantial, you just can't do it. It's essential. So if we take potassium out of your diet, then you really are deficient in building muscle and bone. And this was an absolutely huge insight. But then what happens? You're still taking the same amount of energy. So where does that energy go? Well, in this study, that excess energy that was no longer able to form muscle and bone was turned into fat. So, there's multiple factors here that influence whether or not you gain fat. Now, the corollary of that is that we just have to do that in reverse to lose weight. And it shouldn't come down. You shouldn't have to be white-knuckling it and resisting. We know that, these type A personalities who can be very driven, they can actually control things to such a degree that, for often extended periods of time, they can control their weight. But eventually it's like trying to hold your breath. Eventually you have to take a breath, and eventually you will fail. And that's where the whole calories in, calories out falls down. And then to just throw something else in, just as an aside, the people who can actually succeed will say you've got a middle-aged female who's been able to control her weight for 20 years, with extreme regimen of exercise and extremely low-calorie diet. If we actually look at her, she would have often what we'd consider to be disordered eating. So the simple fact there, I see this in a lot of my patients, a lot of the people who are able to control their weight, it's such, with the standard advice, it's so extreme what they have to do to go to success, but basically they have an eating disorder.